Hello, good morning, everyone. Hope you guys had a good weekend. We will continue on from where we left off last Wednesday. I know you do have the quiz available to you um, between today and Wednesday for the urinary system. So make sure you complete that during this period. And we will basically finish the skeletal system today for sure, and probably start on the muscle. Maybe we'll finish, maybe not. I don't know. We will see. But by the end of the week, we would have finished lecture 10 and 11 for sure. So moving on, we will be talking about the pelvic girdle now. Okay, the pelvic girdle. So just like last time, I am going to explain the anatomy on the 3D model first, and then we will go back to the PowerPoint slide to look at the words. Okay, these are the legs. I'm gonna move them out of the way. There we go. Okay, so this is the pelvic girdle, basically your hip, right? So there are two big pieces of bones, and each piece is composed of like 3 other bones. So let's take a look at the right side here. Okay, so the right side here, we have the ilium, I-L-I-U-M. Don't confuse this with ilium in the digestive system. That one has an E in it. So there's the ilium, there is the pubis, and then at the back, there is the ischium. Ischium, that's how you pronounce it. So that the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis, the 3 bones, they come together and form a coxal bone. That's C-O-X-A-L, coxal bone. So one coxal bone on the right to form the right side of the hip, and then another coxal bone here on the left. So again, there's the ilium, there's the pubis, and then there is the ischium. Okay. Now, a couple of features, and we're gonna write all these down later. So just try to listen to me as best as you can. So let's take a look at the ilium. That's the biggest bone of your of the hip, of the pelvic girdle. And at the top here, we have a iliac crest, C-R-E-S-T, iliac crest. And imagine you're carrying this big box, right, of, I don't know, grocery or something, and then you're trying to fumble for your key and open your door. Okay, so where do you rest the box? You kind of put it on your hip, right? You kind of let it rest there. And so the box is resting on your iliac crest. Can you visualize that? Right, big box just resting on your hip, that would be sitting on your iliac crest. Now at the back here, the ilium is going to connect with this bone. This is the sacrum, right? Remember your backbone, your vertebral column. We have the cervical, the neck, the thoracic, which is in the chest area, lumbar, the lower back, and then we have the sacrum. And then we have the tailbone, right? The coccyx bone. So the ilium is going to articulate, is going to connect with the sacrum on the back. Okay. At the front, we have the pubis. Okay, the pubis, kind of in the pubic area. And it joins right here at the front. The cartilage is not shown in a diagram. I'm not going to bring it back up because if I bring up the cartilage, then a whole bunch of other cartilage is going to show up. It's going to be confusing. But there's a little bit of cartilage here, and that's where the 2 pubis is going to join at the front. That is called a symphysis pubis. We will label that later on. Okay. At the back here, there is the ischium. If you're sitting right now, then you are sitting on your on this round knob at the back, right? This round knob is called the ischial tuberosity. That's basically the bone that you sit on. Okay? Now there is the femur, which is your leg, your thigh bone, right, the longest one, and there is a ball here, the head of the femur, which connects into a socket that's formed by the coxal bone. It forms a ball and socket joint, right? The other ball and socket joint in the body is your shoulder. Remember, your the head of the humerus goes into the glenoid cavity that is formed by your scapula, right? That was the other one that we talked about. So here, similarly in the leg, we have the head of the femur that is going into a socket. Now I'm going to delete the femur here, and you can see there is the socket. So the socket is called the acetabulum, and again, we'll label it later. Okay, I'm just trying to give you an introduction here. So the acetabulum is actually made up of all three of the bones. There is the ilium contributing to the top 1/3 roughly of the socket. We have the pubis making a little bit of the anterior socket, and then we have the ischium making the posterior part of the socket. Okay, so that's the where the head of the femur is going to fit in. Now, there is another opening here. It's called the obturator foramen. And that is for like blood vessels and nerves to go through. Okay, so you have like a bunch of nerves and blood vessels coming down from your, spinal cord and stuff like that, and they have to go into the leg. But we want to feed them through the obturator foramen. So, when we sit down, we're not going to be compressing a blood vessel, where we're not going to be pinching on a nerve, right? Because they're all nicely protected by the foramen here. So that's the purpose of that. And that foramen, the obturator foramen, is made up of two bones: the pubis at the front and the ischium at the back. Okay, now there is a big hold here. We don't have to know what it's called, but it's particularly important for female, because the size of this opening is going to restrict how long the baby can stay in the womb. Right? If the baby gets too big, then the head of the baby will physically not fit through this opening, this bone here, right? And then they would have to take it out through C-section, for example. So that is, the pelvic girdle. Why don't we take out the study guide, and we will label the pelvic girdle. So there it is. I'll give you a moment to dig that up.
Sorry, sir, you said the obturator foramen is made up of which two bones?
The pubis at the front and the ischium at the back.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so we can label all that stuff right now, right? All the stuff that I said on this tiny diagram. Right, so let's start with the three bones. Now it's a little bit hard to clearly find out where the boundaries of these bones are. It's not really clear cut on this diagram, but that's okay. We're just gonna have an approximation. All right, so this bone that I'm coloring is the biggest one of the pelvic girdle, and I hope you remember which one this is.
Ilium?
That is the ilium. Thank you. Very good. So that is ilium with an I. Now on the ilium, there is the iliac crest, right? Again, that's where you put your box on, like grocery box. I can't think of a better way to describe it. Iliac crest. Okay? Or like, you know, my kids, when they're really angry, they do this like posture, right? They're putting their hands like, oh, so angry. They're putting it on their iliac crest. Tiny, tiny iliac crest. So that's the ilium. And at the back, right, it connects with this irregular bone, irregular shape, right? We call that the sacrum. All right. At the front, we have, oh, actually, you know what? Oh boy. I didn't really do a good job here, but I should circle out this part right here. Okay, circle part here. So that is the socket, right? That is the acetabulum. Acetabulum. Okay. And that is where the head of the humerus, sorry, the head of the femur inserts here. Okay. So over here, right, the acetabulum, the socket. Now, I can see the coloring of the diagram that I showed you also didn't really do a good job, but I really want to emphasize that this socket is not just formed by the ilium, right? It's the three bones, right? They all contribute to it, right? So maybe make a point to color in a little bit there. I know it's not super clear on this picture, right? But you know, try your best. Okay? You understand my point? Right? Like I showed you earlier, right? In the 3D model, the socket is formed by all of the bones. So at the front, we have the pubis. And what was not shown in the 3D model, because I didn't turn on the cartilage, is this thing right here. Right, so this is the symphysis pubis. Sometimes you will read like they call it the pubic symphysis. Same thing. Okay? P-U-B-I-C, right? It's just like depends where you put the adjective, I guess. Symphysis pubis. Now, stay with me for a moment. This is a reproductive system that we'll be learning Wednesday, I'm hoping. Give me a moment here, guys. Oh, there it is. So this is the male one. Hopefully you can tell. And there is the symphysis pubis. Okay, that's where the two pubis bone join together, right? Okay. It's a little bit of a cartilage, right? In the female as well, right? Symphysis pubis right here. Okay, so you will be able to see that in mid-sagittal diagram. All right. Okay, what else do we have? Another one here, the blue one. That would be the ischium. Right. So together, ilium, pubis, and ischium, it makes up the coxal bone. So you have two of them, coxal bone. Sometimes they're called like coxa. So many different ways to call them. Doesn't really matter. You can use either one. Okay, coxal bone. And what are you sitting on right now? You are sitting on the ischiotuberosity, which is this brown part here. All right. My younger daughter is kind of skinny, so whenever she sits on my lap, I can literally feel like her butt bone, right? The butt bone is the ischial tuberosity. Okay, what is this thing right here? This is another opening. Do you guys remember what that is? That was the one Min was asking about earlier, right? That's the obturator for Raymond. And again, it's just like a nice opening for important things to go through. Blood vessels, nerves. You don't want to be sitting on them. You don't want to be compressing them when you cross your legs, right? So it's nice to have a place for them to fit through. Does anybody have any questions so far about the
Can you zoom out, sir?
Sure. The pelvic girdle. I guess there's one more thing we can label. A little tiny bit here. What are those? Anybody remember what they're called? I mean, they're called tailbones, but then what's a proper term for it?
Coccyx.
COCCYX. Okay, so there are 3 to 5 fused together, right? Yes, it's confusing, right? There's coxal bone, there's coccyx bone. It all sound very similar, but I'm sure you'll manage. Okay, so that is that. Hopefully it's not too bad. So this is the PowerPoint for it. Okay, it's basically, I don't understand why my toolbar is not going away. Has been like that for some time now. Anybody know why? Let me see.
Did you lock it?
Did I lock it? It has always been locked, I think. Anyway, just like OCD, I cannot. It bothers me for some reason. We'll figure it out later. Maybe I'll restart the computer. And moving on. So this is everything we talk about. Like there is a, sacroiliac joint is just like where the ilium joins with the sacrum, right? Like these extra words don't if I didn't mention it in the diagram, you don't have to worry about it, right? But then we see everything else we talk about, right? The acetabulum, symphysis pubis, obturator foramen, and of course the pelvis, right? It serves as a sort of protection as well, right? For urinary bladder, reproductive organs, right? And even the lower portion of the large intestine. So that's just to show you the coxal bone when it's removed. And this one that we're looking at, do you guys want to tell me whether this is the left half or the right half? And please tell me how you can tell.
Left.
Left.
Left? How do you know it's the left one?
The socket is exposed to the left side, or
The socket is exposed on the left side. Okay, how about here? Let's take a look at the ischium and the pubis and the socket, right? Okay, which way is the ischium? Is that the back or at the front?
it's the front.
The ischium?
Wait, the wait, hold on, the
It's okay. Yeah, this is the butt bone, right? I was saying this is the round part that we sit on, right? So that is actually at the back. And then pubis, remember pubis is like pubic area, that's at the front. And so if the socket is on the side, right? And then this is the back and this is the front, then this has to be the right half of the coxal bone, right? Does that make sense?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good way to help with the orientation in some cases. Yeah, so just read these through if you are confused about what I said. But I think it should be okay. We labeled it already. I showed you the 3D model, but just in case you need it. And again, if I didn't talk about these things, right, the greater sciatic notch, and if it's not bolded here, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, moving down to the legs.
Sir,
Yeah.
what was the correct name for the tailbone?
Oh, coccyx, COCCYX.
Thank you.
All right, the leg. Let's see. Let's take a look at the leg right here. So we got the femur. That's the longest bone in the body, and you know that's the one that we drew last time, right? The shaft is gonna be the diaphysis, remember? And then we have the epiphysis at the ends. And all bones, remember, are covered by this thin connective tissue called the periosteum. So we have the head of the femur going into the acetabulum at the top, ball and socket joint. At the distal end, it is going to make an articulation, a connection with the tibia. Okay, tibia, and only the tibia. There is no connection with the fibula. Right? So the tibia is the shin bone, sometimes called. Right? If you play soccer, or if you see people play soccer, or if your kids play soccer, then they wear the shin pad, right? There's a pad that goes over your like lower leg, so you know you don't hurt yourself when someone kick you there to try to get the ball, right? Like over here in this position. So that's the shin bone, the tibia. I remember tibia starts with a T, and this bone kind of makes a T shape, right? It's a central weight bearing bone of the lower limb. And on the side for stability, we have a fibula. So we have the tibia, the big one, and the fibula. Okay, B-U-L-A, okay. Tibia, fibula. And so at the distal end here, we have 7 small bones. You remember the hand, right? Hand is humerus, radius, ulna, and then what are the wrist bone called? So see if you remember. We have 8 here. Last time I couldn't count 8, remember?
Carpals.
That's right, those are the carpals, right? Okay, carpal, C-A-R-P-A-L, right? It's car and then pals, P-A-Ls, like the people who share the same car with you, carpals. At the foot here, we have the tarsals, T-A-R-S-A-L, and there are 7 tarsals altogether. And the tarsals, 7 of them are shown. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I counted before I count. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Now I only want you to pay attention to 2 of them. Okay? These are the tarsals again. There is the talus, okay, which your tibia and fibula is gonna make a connection to. You know the like the little knob on your ankle, right? That you can feel on the on both sides really. The one that's on the inside, that's formed by the tibia. Okay, that's this knob right here, and it kind of clamps onto the talus. And on the outside, you are actually feeling the fibula. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like the feet, right? Has a little round bone on the outside and on the inside, right? And so you're actually feeling the knob that's on the tibia and the fibula, and they kind of clamp down onto the talus to create your ankle. Okay. And at the back, the heel bone is really big. This is called calcaneus. Calcaneus. Okay. So both calcaneus and talus, they are part of the tarsal bones. You have 7 of them. And then the other ones we don't have to know the names for. Okay. So if these are called tarsals, these ones are metatarsals, just like the hand. Carpals, metacarpals, and then phalanges. All your toes, they are also called phalanges. Okay, that's That's pretty much it. Do we have a foot to label here somewhere? Nope, no foot. I meant to put one in, but I keep on forgetting. That's all right. We'll go back to our PowerPoint slides here. Oh, I forgot the kneecap. Right, the kneecap is called the patella. Right? Patella. Patella is kind of special because there is ligament that connects from the femur to the fibula, to tibia, sorry. And within this ligament, that's where you will find the patella. So it's embedded within a ligament. And in case you need a refresher, ligament is what connects bones to bones. Tendon is what connects muscle to bone. Okay. So that is the patella, Ella. Okay, here's the foot again. We have superior view, top view here. We got the talus. Okay, remember, the tibia is going to be clamping onto it, right, and forms the little knob, the ankle knob on the lateral side, and then the fibula is going to be forming the one that's on the medial side. Your heel is the calcaneus. So together, all these bones are the tarsal bones. And you have the metatarsals and the phalanges. Right? Also, 14 phalanges, right? If you count your toe bones. So that's it. That's all the bones. All right. I am sure you will enjoy labeling this diagram. I'll post the answer on the eCentennial as usual. But give it a try, right? See how many you can label. It's a total of what, 32. So that's pretty reasonable. Okay. Next thing we're going to learn is shapes and joints. We can classify bones based on shape. So there's the long bone, short bone, flat bone, and we have irregular shape. So if it doesn't fit in other categories, we just call it like irregular. Most of the bones in the head, parietal bone, temporal bone, frontal bone, they're considered as flat, okay, because they're relatively thin, right? And if I ask you to provide examples of flat bone, just choose the ones that are in the skull. Long bones are pretty self-explanatory, right? So like you get the humerus, the radius, the ulna, all those are long bones. But metatarsals are also considered as long bone. So as long as they are relatively like rectangular in shape, then it's considered as a long bone. It doesn't have to be like, long, right? This could be a long bone if it's rectangular in shape. Okay. Short bone would be the phalanges are short, and the bones are kind of square in shape. That would be short bone. So a lot of the carpals, that would be considered as short bone. And again, if it doesn't fit, then we'll call it irregular bones. The vertebra, they are all irregular bones. Does anybody want to give me another example of an irregular bone? Something that looks weird. We saw one today at the beginning when we were labeling the pelvic girdle. Yeah, Zia said the sacrum. That is one ugly looking bone, right? So that's irregular for sure. The sphenoid bone in the head, right? The one that looks like a butterfly, that's irregular, I would say, right? Okay. So here are some examples if you need to have a reference. But feel free to put more. Do I have another slide here? Oh, there we go. Okay, so here's a bunch of additional examples. But sometimes it's not so clear cut, right? Like phalanges, you would think, oh, that's a little bit rectangular, but it's you know, they actually call that as a short bone. It's not super important, I wouldn't say, right? Just know that there are gray areas, okay, and it's not the end of the world if you think it's a short bone when it's a long, and vice versa. Joints. Okay, so joints are also called articulations. That's basically where two bones, you know, connect together. And bones can be movable, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It means that it can create motion. There are also partially movable joints, so they are only able to move a little bit. And then there are immovable joints. Okay? So now we're going to focus on the first type, the movable joints. Under movable joints, there are 6 different types, okay, depending on the kind of connection it makes and the kind of motion it allows. Right? So pivot is allows you to do side-to-side motion like the head. Okay, so the pivot joint is the atlas and axis. Remember, atlas is C1, first bone in your cervical vertebra, right? And then this is C2. So there's a knob that protrudes on top of the axis, which goes through the opening in the atlas, and that allows you to create a pivot joint, right? To shake your head from side to side. Next, we have a saddle joint. Do I have a picture of these things? Yeah, so that's what a pivot looks like. A saddle is right here. Okay, so saddle allows kind of sort of like a rotating motion, but also a little bit of gliding motion, right? And the example of that would be between the carpals and some of the metacarpals. Okay, so it kind of allows your hand to go like this, to wave, okay, side to side motion, and a little bit of rotation as well, right? Gliding joints are basically two bones that are just side to side, and they have a little bit of rubbing motion going on, gliding motion, if you would. So that is between the carpals. You have 8 of them, really tight here. The wrist bone don't really move, right? Okay, but like, if you rotate your hand a little bit, they kind of just glide past each other slightly. Okay, it's not designed for wide ranges of motion. There are a little bit of condyle joint as well, and that exists in the metacarpals and the phalanges. Like if you think about your thumb, you can kind of rotate like that, but it kind of clicks halfway, right? So that's like, not a full ball and socket. There's a little transition there. And the condyle joint looks something like this. It's kind of like a ball and socket, but with less a range of motion, right? That's permitted. Hinge joint is the elbow, right, and the knee, just like the hinge of a door. At the elbow, it is the humerus with the ulna, right? Your elbow right here, that's the ulna bone that you're feeling. And at the knee, it is the humerus connecting with both, not both, with a tibia, right, to create the knee joint. And then ball and socket is the most wide range, right? So at the shoulder, we have the humerus, the head of the humerus, plus the glenoid cavity. And at the hip, we have the femur plus the acetabulum. Femur, right? So these are the 6 types of movable joints. And that's just to show you what they look like. It's hard to visualize. I have to agree, like without seeing like a physical model. But the questions are just going to be very simple. It's like, which of the following is an example of a pivot joint, right? So C1 and C2. I know it says like plane joint here, but it's the same meaning as gliding joint. Okay, it's like two planes that just, again, rub past each other, right? Okay. Then we have the partially movable joint. They offer a very limited range of motion, and that will be like the backbone. Okay, the like a T3 connecting with the T4, right? It can move a little bit, but it's not meant for wide ranges of motion, and that makes sense because we need stability in the spine, right, to prop us up. Right? So you can bend forward, right, and it's a collection of all the movement of the entire spine that allows us to bend forward. But individually, between two adjacent vertebra, there is limited movement. It's like, you know, stacking chairs, right? If you stack two chairs together, you can kind of move them back and forth a little bit, but it doesn't really offer much range of motion. But if your stack of chair gets high enough, then it's possible to, you know, bend the whole thing forward quite a bit, right? And then the immovable joints would be like the sutures that are in the skull, right? At one point, they were partially movable in the baby's head, but as your body replaces the cartilage with calcium, right, in the ossification, eventually they become fully ossified. They are fused together, and it's completely immovable, which is a good thing, right? Of course, because you know we want to protect the brain. We don't want the head to be too floppy. Okay, so here is the axis and here's the atlas, right? And you can see this thing can go right through it. And if you were listening, you probably know the answer to this one. It forms a pivot joint. Pivot joint. Okay, let's see if you remember this one. Kind of repeat it enough times that you know you should remember it. Yeah, I think most people got it. It will be the pubis, the ilium, and the ischium. So A, B, and E. All right. Select all the long bones. Let's try this one. Oops, sorry. Okay. So long bones would be the metacarpals. These are the, you know, the back of the handbook, hand bones, if you would. The humerus for sure. Sternum is flat, tibia is long, and parietal is flat as well. Okay, so pretty good. Good work. Any more? Or is this it? Okay, give me a second. Okay, now we're gonna talk about these hormones. 1 second. I don't know what is going on here. We're going to talk about another pair of antagonistic hormone. Remember the last antagonistic pair that we learned was aldosterone and ANH, right? Hopefully you have studied those because you're going to need it for your quiz. Now we're going to learn a second pair, which is important for maintaining normal blood calcium level. Okay. Can you guys tell me one thing that we learned in the course? Like some kind of physiological function that requires calcium. Something we learn in Unit 2. What process requires calcium?
Is it like per neurotransmitters?
Yeah, exactly, right? To release neurotransmitter, you need calcium, all right? So we need to have sufficient amount of calcium that's available for that. We don't want too much calcium. Too much calcium can, you know, cause problem with the charges of the resting potential, for example. We also actually need calcium, as we'll learn in later part of this lecture. We need calcium for muscle contraction. Okay, too much calcium is going to cause your muscle to be hyperactive, right? So you might have like twitches. Not enough calcium, on the other hand, could cause muscle weakness. Okay? So you need to have like a normal homeostatic level of blood calcium. Right? So what are we going to do if there's too much calcium or if there's not enough calcium? Well, a high level of calcium is going to stimulate the thyroid gland to release something called calcitonin. That's a hormone right there. Okay, your thyroid gland is right here. Okay? This is your thyroid gland. Right? Is the only organ in the body that uses iodine. Right. So in addition to calcitonin, it also makes metabolic hormones. Okay? But in the context of what we're talking about, it releases calcitonin. Now, people get confused all the time as to how do you remember this? There's also the other PTH, right? So calcitonin, right? There is an IN at the end. So when there is an increase in calcium, you will release calcitonin. Okay, IN. Increased calcium releases calcitonin from the thyroid gland. Right? So what are we going to do with all these extra calcium in the blood? Well, the logical thing to do is to put them in the bones, right? Remember the bone, the matrix, the lamina of the bones are made up of calcium salt, right? And phosphate salt. So if you get extra calcium lying around in the blood, you will put them in the bones. So that's one action of calcitonin. It deposits calcium in the bones. And if you have a lot in the blood already, you can excrete some of it in the kidney, right? You reduce calcium uptake in the kidney. Remember, in the proximal tubule, there are like reabsorption going on. 60 to 70% of the filtrates are being reabsorbed, right? And so under the influence of calcitonin, you would want to reduce calcium uptake. You can take everything else. You can take the water, you can take the sugar and whatnot, but calcium, because we have a lot already, so we can slow down the reabsorption. Okay, so together, these options, these actions are going to bring the calcium level back to normal. If calcium level goes down, then your parathyroid glands will release the parathyroid hormone, the PTH. Now, where is your parathyroid gland? So if this mouse is my thyroid gland, okay, I'm gonna take it out, and then on the back of my thyroid gland, there will be 4 little knobs. Those will be the parathyroid gland. Okay, so it's located on the back, posterior side of the thyroid gland. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. These little parathyroid glands, they secrete the parathyroid hormone, the PTH, which will help bring the calcium back up. So where are you going to get the calcium from? You can get it from the bones, okay? You can increase uptake in the kidneys, right? Absorb more from the proximal tubule, absorb more in the distal tubule and collecting duct, okay? You can also increase calcium uptake in the intestines, okay? So collectively, these actions will bring the calcium level back up. Now, if you're not having enough dietary calcium, then the only real source is the bones, right? And if you consistently have PTH in your system, then your bones would keep on getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and that could contribute to what condition?
Osteoporosis.
Exactly, right? Osteoporosis, which means your bones become very porous and very weak. And so we don't really want that. Okay, so calcitonin and PTH, they work against each other to help maintain blood calcium level. Now, why don't we fill this chart in together? Like, I mean, I'm sure you can do it on your own, but I think it's better if we do it together, so it will help you remember it. Every time we learn a new hormone, we're gonna fill in a chart like this. Okay, lots of hormone coming your way in the reproductive system as well. So there is that to look forward to. Okay, so this is calcitonin. Location of secretion, I just told you that moments ago. That would be the thyroid gland. And the thyroid gland is this one, right? Looks like a little butterfly. And the stimulus, when do you need calcitonin? You need calcitonin when there is an increase in blood calcium level. And maybe you have been taking calcium supplements, okay? Maybe you are drinking your milk on a daily basis. Whatever the case, if you have increase in blood calcium level, you will release the calcitonin, which will increase calcium deposition in bones. And what cell is responsible for building bones? Does anyone remember from last class?
Osteoblast.
That's right, the osteoblast, right? The one with a B, right? B for building bones. So the calcitonin will stimulate those osteoblasts to help deposit bones. You will reduce calcium absorption in kidneys. You don't need them anymore. You have enough. You can pee them out. All right, that's that. Next, we have the parathyroid hormone. Where does the parathyroid hormone comes from? It comes from the parathyroid gland. Okay, which is on the back of your thyroid, right? This is back of thyroid. Okay. What's the stimulus for PTH? It will be a decrease in blood calcium. Okay. What do we do when we don't have enough calcium? We will increase calcium absorption from 3 places: bones, kidneys. Kidneys is just like reclaiming what you have lost, right? You don't actually have like extra input of calcium from like an external source, right? Whatever you lose at you lose at the kidneys was your body storage to begin with, right? So you're just reclaiming it, okay, minimizing the loss. So the only real source that's external would be from the intestine, right? From the food that you eat, right? And so if you're not actually getting supplements or like actually foods that are rich in calcium, then you are just going to be burning up your calcium reserve from the bones. Any question?
Is
Yeah, go.
there a specific order that the calcium gets absorbed? Is it intestines, kidneys, and then bones?
Oh no, I don't think there is a particular order. It's like all these things happening at the same time, right? To just try to boost it. Yeah. All right, so that is that. Let's go back to our PowerPoint right here. That's just to show you the thyroid gland, but I show you where mine is already, so that should be no confusion. We in fact actually learned this way back, right, in the respiratory system, right? There was the thyroid cartilage. You remember, it protects your larynx, and then below it you would have your thyroid gland, and on the back, those are the little knobs. Okay. Normal bone, a normal spongy bone. Remember, the spongy bones are usually found at the epiphysis of the bone, as well as towards the center of the bone when it transitions from compact bone to the to where your bone marrow is located. Right, there is a little bit of spongy bone there. That's what healthy spongy bone looks like. And then spongy bones in osteoporosis, you can see it's getting really porous. And you know, if the person slip and fall, it could shatter the bone easily, right? So slipping and falling is the #1 debilitating cause for senior, right? Okay, rickets is another condition that could occur when there is a lack of vitamin D. So absorbing calcium from the intestine is actually not quite straightforward. Okay, in order to do that, you need to have the activated form of vitamin D. Now, we can get activated vitamin D by just being in the sun. Okay, so the sun helps out the body to make vitamin D, but you know, Canada is in northern hemisphere, which means you don't really get a whole lot of sunlight in the winter months, right? And so for kids who are born in the winter months, they will not have sufficient exposure to help them make all those vitamin D to help them absorb the calcium, and that's why there is the baby D drops, right? Okay, if you have kids, your pediatrician probably recommend you taking that. Not you, I mean like your kids, right? Taking that, and it's just the activated form of vitamin that would supplement the one that the sun makes for you. And it's important for kids to get their vitamin D so that they have enough calcium to help their bone grow. If the kid doesn't have enough calcium, then what happens is when they start to walk, the weight of the body will actually strain the bones of the lower leg, right? So you can see the femur here and the tibia, it's like warped, right? Because it doesn't have enough calcium in them to provide the strength to support the body weight. And that would be what we call like bow legs, right? And you can understand how that would be a problem, right, as the person grows up. So having sufficient vitamin D is important because vitamin D helps absorb calcium. All right, let's see if you were listening. Let's try this. Okay, very good. Most people got it right. The parathyroid gland, the ones at the back, will secrete the PTH, parathyroid hormone. Okay, let's try another one. Good. In a high level of calcitonin will basically try to bring your calcium level back down, and to do that, you will have to increase calcium deposition in bone. Okay, some of you chose increased calcium absorption from kidney. You don't want to absorb more calcium. You already have a lot in your bloodstream, right? So you actually want to decrease that. And that is it for the bones. Any questions before we take a break, and then we'll come back for the muscle stuff? Anybody? Okay. We'll take a 5-minute break and we will continue afterwards. We're going to be drawing stuff, okay? So make sure you get your crayons and markers ready. Right? See you in a bit. So that's it for the bones, and we will do the muscles. I think we can finish muscle today. I have a good feeling about it. Okay, so what's going on with the muscle? What do we need muscle for? Now, there are 3 types of muscles that exist in the body. We have the skeletal muscle, which are the ones that you can voluntarily control. Remember, you have a part in the brain that does that, the primary motor cortex, right? So that's what the focus of this part of the lecture is, right? But you also have things like cardiac muscle, which are only found in the heart. You have no control over that. That's part of your autonomic nervous system. Now, there are also the smooth muscles that surrounds your blood vessels, that surrounds your GI tract, peristalsis that propels your food forward. All those smooth muscles, you have no voluntary control over either. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on the skeletal muscle, right? They help support the body, obviously, right? The muscle props you up. When you sit here, you have postural muscle that continuously contract to keep your back straight, right? So that we don't slouch over because of gravity. It makes the skeleton frame moves. Bones forms the articulation. Bones permits all those movements, the pivot joint and the hinge joint and all that. But it is the muscle that pulls on them that allows you to produce movement. Okay. It helps maintain constant body temperature. People don't really think about this, but when we are cold, right, we shiver. Shivering is muscle contraction, and the contraction generates heat to keep you warm. Okay? Assists fluid movement in cardiovascular and lymphatic vessels. This is something we talked about way back in lecture 1, right? When we move our legs, the calf muscles, for example, they contract, and it helps with the venous return, right? And since there are no pumps in the lymphatic vessels, those movement of the muscles help create pressure to return the lymph back into general circulation as well. The muscle themselves protects the bones and internal organs, okay? Because the muscle is superficial to the bones, right? So there's a little bit of a barrier between the muscle and the bones and the organs. So if something stabs you, you're not going to damage the important stuff. The muscle you can damage and probably repair, but these are more vital things, right, that you don't want to damage. So that's functions of skeletal muscle. Pretty general stuff. Structure and organization. All right, this is very confusing to explain. I will try my best, but if you get confused, ask questions. That's very important, right? So this is what we're going to be drawing, right? This whole thing, and I'm going to explain it. But just so you're planning, right? We're going to have a landscape orientation, and we're going to be drawing that diagram. Okay, I hope you're ready for this. So this is called muscle organization, right? Let's start in the top left here. Right? So let's say we have like maybe this is the humerus. Okay, and then it's going to make a connection with the ulna, right? Ulna, and this will be the radius. Okay. So like the chicken ring, remember? Now this is a hinge joint, and so you're gonna have a muscle here. You're gonna have a muscle here that let me try that one more time. You're gonna have a muscle here that connects to the humerus, and then it connects right here. Okay, anybody know what that muscle is?
Bicep?
Yeah, that's the biceps right here. Okay, so it's called bicep because it actually has two connections here, but we're not gonna get too technical here. And then at the back we have the tricep, right, which has like 3 connections to the bones. So that's the bicep. And what we're gonna do here, what we're gonna try to do, is to cut a bit of the bicep out. Okay, cut it with if this is the bicep, we're gonna cut it like this with a plane, and then we're gonna see what it looks like. Right, let's see what it looks like. Yeah, I also want to know, like, from you guys, when you were filling out the survey, like, do you like me doing these kind of drawings, or like, is it just too much? Often people say I can't follow, I can't create the same drawing. Like, I want to know. I don't know if this is helping you or not. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't like it. Maybe you want more of it. I have no idea. Some people find it, patronizing that I'm coloring in class with them. I don't know. I like coloring. I think it helps. But like I said, I want to hear from you. All right. So there is our beautiful bicep. Right? Remember, we're cutting it out. So it's going to look like this. Okay. Do your best. So this is like a typical, drumstick that you see in a cartoon, right? Holding it up, piece of meat like that. All right. So if you take a look at the cross section, you actually will find a bunch of things like this. There we go. You can see these when you cut your beef. Okay. Again, like, I don't assume everybody eats meat. If you're vegan, then maybe this is not a best example to illustrate. But if you do eat meat and you cut the beef open, you can see the individual circle stuff that I'm drawing here, right? Do you guys know what I mean? Maybe. Let me see if I can find a nice meat picture to show you. Let me see. I should have looked for this before coming to class, but I just thought of it all of a sudden. Let me see if there's a nice picture here that shows you what I mean. No, they just look really. I search up beef cuts, and they're just all like, oh, there it is. Maybe a little bit. Yeah. Okay, this one. Now, let me take it over. Give me a second. Okay, there's a nice piece of meat, right? And then you can see this is cooked though, like it's hard to tell, but that's the little circle that I'm talking about, right? These little things here, right? That's what these are. Right? I don't know if that helps you visualize what's going on, right? But that's what it is, right? So what are those things, right? What do we call them, and what are they there for? Those are called the fascicles. Right? So each one of these circles, they're called a fascicle. Fascicle, and fascicle is a bundle bundle of muscle fiber. And muscle fiber is essentially muscle cell. So if you take a bunch of muscle cells and you group them together, you're gonna get yourself a nice fascicle. So you have a lot of fascicles here. And in between, you might have some blood vessels. And there's the blood vessels, artery and veins. And then you will also have some nerve endings, right, to control the muscle, right? So the orange are the nerves. And I don't want to oversaturate the picture, okay? But you can make a note yourself. The orange are the nerves, and then the red and the blue, those are the blood vessels. So far, okay, right? Now, the entire muscle is going to be covered by a layer of connective tissue. Okay. Now, don't color all the way in. Okay, I'll tell you why in a second. We just leave a little bit of a uncolored region here. Okay, so this is connective tissue. And that is called the epimysium. Okay. Epimysium. It's kind of like the bones, right? The bones is covered by the periosteum, and here we have the epimysium, which is connective tissue. That surrounds the entire muscle. Okay, and sometimes you see this is kind of like a slimy coating when you buy like chicken breast or chicken thigh or something like that. Again, I don't presume everybody cooks or everybody eat meats, but if you do, right, maybe you can relate. And there's a slimy coating, kind of like a membrane-ish thing that comes off from your chicken when you buy them. That's the epimysium. I cook a lot, so that's why I always try to relate to food in the lecture. Okay, now the fascicle. We're gonna pull one fascicle out. Okay, remember, leave this uncolored for the time being. We're gonna take one of these things out. I'm gonna take it out. Let me try to do that a little bit better. Oops, take one out. There you go. So that whole thing is a fascicle, right? Fascicle, 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 and then you can pull one out. So this whole thing is also a fascicle. Okay, that whole thing is a fascicle. And the fascicle is surrounded by another layer of connective tissue. Okay, and again, we're not going to color all the way. Just going to color a little bit, and I'll explain why later. That is the perimysium, okay, which is, as you can imagine, connective tissue that surrounds the entire fascicle. Okay. So, if you are still with me, and I hope you are, each of these fascicles would have its own perimysium, right? Perimysium, perimysium. Do you understand? right? And this is the important part. Listen, if you peel away the epimysium that surrounds the entire muscle, if you peel that away, immediately underneath the epimysium, you're gonna see the paramecium, right? Do you understand that? Okay, I hope that makes sense. Any question about what I'm saying? No? All right. Okay. So that's that. So the fascicle, remember, is a bundle of muscle fibers, right? Bundle of muscle cells. So over here, we can see all the individual muscle cells. And again, one more food analogy, and I will stop. If you eat like a pulled pork, right? Those little shredded meats, each strand is essentially a fascicle. Okay, each strand is essentially a fascicle. All right, so here, all these are muscle cells, and we are going to pull another one out. Oh, there we go. We just got to pull it out one more time, and then we're going to be done, okay? I know. So this thing that was just pulled out, that is a single muscle cell, which we call a muscle fiber. Okay. A bundle of them, a group of them, is going to call paramecium. Now you probably guessed this already. The muscle fiber is surrounded by another layer of connective tissue. Okay, so if you peel away the paramecium, you will immediately see that connective tissue, right? And all these will be surrounded by the same connective tissue, right? It's hard to do it individually, but you get the idea. Same concept here, but now it's the green stuff. And the green stuff is called the endomysium. Connective tissue. That surrounds the entire muscle fiber. Okay. Now I'm gonna pause here and try to explain to you this situation again, okay? With another analogy. Okay, so this is a crayon, right? Crayon. So you see the crayon has a little paper on it, right? Right. So the crayon is like muscle fiber. And what would the paper be, huh? The paper that goes around the muscle fiber, what do you think that is?
Epimysium.
Which one is it? The epi, the endo, or the peri? Which one?
Endo.
Epi.
Endo, yeah. This is the muscle fiber. Okay, muscle fiber is the innermost one, right? Okay, so this would be the single muscle cell, and then you have the endomysium, okay, the paper, right? So now I'm gonna take a bunch of them. Okay, I'm gonna take a bunch of them, and if you have a bundle of this stuff, a bunch of these crayons, a bunch of these muscle fibers, what do we call this bunch?
Fascicle?
That's right, the fascicle. Very good. Okay. So in this analogy, what is a fascicle? Hold on. I am trying to copy some pictures over to help you see what I'm talking about. So that would be a fascicle, eh? Do you understand? right? Now try to stay with me. I kind of like this analogy, sort of. The box here, the whole box is like a fascicle, yeah? What about the cart box? The cart box that's where you put the crayons in. What do you think the cart box represent here? Just guess. Yeah. Yes, Ashana, go ahead. Or Leah, doesn't matter.
The entire muscle, so the epicardium.
Not yet, but good try. Thank you. This would be the perimysium. Okay, so the box bundles, like wraps around the whole fascicle here, right? Okay, so which is what I'm trying to tell you. If you peel away the cart box immediately, you will see the paper that's wrapped around the individual crayons, right? So if you peel away the perimysium, you would immediately see the endomysium. Do you guys see the connection I'm trying to make here, or this totally flops? Give me some feedback. Is this helping or no? Not really. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So what are we gonna do with this fascicle, right? All right. It's I tried to found a picture on Google, and this is the best I could come up with. Okay, hold on. There we go. All right, so you take this whole thing and you're gonna put them in a bigger box, like the brown card box here, right? So this whole box is gonna be like the whole muscle. Do you understand? Okay, like if I wrap this in, some shrink wrap or something, then that would be the epimysium. Right? So when I open up the brown box, okay, which represents the whole muscle, if I open up the brown box, immediately inside, what would I see? I would see these boxes of crayons, right? Which represents the fascicle, yeah? And if I open up one of those crayon boxes, if I open up one of the fascicles and I pull one crayon out, that's gonna be the muscle cell, and it's surrounded by the endomysium, right? Can you guys visualize this? I hope so. I hope so. Any questions though, before we move on, before I delete all these crazy crayon stuff? Yeah. This is funny because I didn't think of this analogy. Like many years ago when I first started teaching this thing at school, there was a student who all of a sudden said, "Oh, this is exactly like cigarettes," and I was like, "What?" So he was telling me, "Oh, you know how at duty free, right, at the border, you can buy this whole carton of cigarettes," and then he said, "When you open up cigarette, you get like a pack, and then the individual cigarettes is like wrapped by that, I don't know what you call it, but the white thing." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense." And then I thought talking about cigarettes is not entirely appropriate in the class, so eventually I changed it to crayons. And anyway, just thought it was interesting to share with you. Let me just erase all these things, and we're gonna go back to our lovely drawing here. Okay, so muscle fibers, right? Which equals to muscle cell. And a muscle cell is like any other cell. It's made up of all the components of a cell that you would expect to find. It's surrounded by cell membrane. There's going to be the cytoplasm and all those stuff, right? But there is always a catch. We have special names for these parts. For muscle cells. They're essentially the same thing, okay, but we just give them special names. So surrounding the muscle cell is going to be, of course, the cell membrane. Okay, so if you peel away the endomysium, the connective tissue, you will immediately see the cell membrane, and the cell membrane is called the sarcolemma. Cell membrane. Okay. And the cytoplasm is called the sarcoplasm. The inside is called the sarcoplasm. which is same as cytoplasm. Okay. And we're just gonna pull one last thing out, I promise. Scatter throughout the cytoplasm, scatter throughout the sarcoplasm, you're gonna have all these fibers. Okay, we can pull one more out. I don't know how much space you have on your paper, but we're gonna go around this way just so we can have more space, okay? So this thing that I pull out, my goodness, this is called the myofibril. Okay, myofibril. So it's all over the cytoplasm. It's very long. And the myofibril is made up of repeating units that are connected end to end. Right, so that's one of another one. It's like, sushi. The whole row, and you can cut them into little repeating units. Okay. So these things, they are called sarcomere, which is the contractile unit of muscle. Okay. So when the sarcomere contracts, your muscle fiber, your muscle cell is going to contract, get shorter, and then your whole fascicle shortens, and then your whole muscle shortens. Right? So when the muscle shortens, it creates a pulling force, right? Muscle can only contract to produce a force. They can never get longer than their original length. Okay, so the contraction is produced by the sarcomere, and inside the sarcomere there are two types of fibers. I'm just gonna put them here for completion, and then but we're gonna explain more later. Okay, so we have the thin filament, which is called actin, which is represented here by the red lines. Okay, so these are actin. And then you have the thicker one that's in the middle. Okay, they're kind of intercalated, like they are what's the word? Like alternating. Okay, one between the other. So the orange ones, those are called the myosin. Okay, so long story short, when myosin grabs onto actin and pull, the sarcomere shortens. And when all the sarcomeres shorten, it creates muscle contraction. Okay. Almost there. Just need to add one more thing. Normal cells have endoplasmic reticulum, right? You know that. And the muscle cells also have that, but it goes by a different name. And it's going to be surrounding the myofibril here. Okay, so it's going to be covering the entire myofibril, and these are called sarcoplasmic reticulum. And the sarcoplasmic reticulum, they store calcium. I'll tell you why the calcium are important later on. And I promise one last thing right here. One last thing. Then we're done talking about this. Every now and then along the sarcoplasmic reticulum, there are these channels. Okay, they're called the T tubules. We'll come back to them later. Okay, the T tubules will, it belongs to part of a network that leads all the way to the surface of the sarcolemma, all the way to the surface of the cell, all the way to the cell membrane. If it's not immediately clear about how this looks like, that's okay. I will go through it with you in a second. Okay, so I'm just gonna give you a moment. Oops, sorry. Just gonna give you a moment to copy whatever you need. Okay, I know some of you like me to zoom out here. And then we'll continue.
Yeah, sorry, can I ask about the sarcoplasmic reticulum?
Sure, please.
It's a membrane over the myofibril, yeah?
It's the endoplasmic reticulum, basically. That's wrapping around the myofibrils.
Okay, so it's not like, oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so it's not really like a membrane like these epimysium, paramysium, endomysium. It's exactly same as the endoplasmic reticulum, but it wraps around the myofibril. And the purpose of that, like these membranes are connective tissue, right? They are there to glue things together. But the sarcoplasmic reticulum, it's not to glue things together. They're there to supply the calcium, which we will talk about in a bit. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, and just the two tubes. So those are sections, right?
The T tubules?
Yes.
The T tubules are tubes that are merged to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. We'll see in a bit that when you want to move your muscle, the action potential will spread down the T tubules, which then cause the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release the calcium. So that's why they're there.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else? I know this is really quite heavy. But it is what it is. Just give me a second here. All right. So this is, am I sharing my whole screen? Let me see. I am, right? Yeah, okay. So this is like a 3D model that you can pay $49 for if you want to. But we're just gonna use a free version. Okay, so this is what we just drew. You know, we have the muscle here, okay? And you can see number one is the epimysium, the membrane, the connective tissue rather, that surrounds the whole muscle. And then that would be the whole muscle. And each of these little chunk here, it's not quite circular like we drew it, but it's the same idea, right? That would be, what would that be? Well, if I click on number 2, what's the name that's gonna pop up?
Fascicle?
Yes, that's the fascicle. Very good, right? So a bunch of fascicles here. What we do not see in this picture is the you know, the blood vessels, right? And the nerve endings, which would exist between the fascicles, right? Then we're gonna pull one out, and then if I click on number 3, what would that be?
Paramysium.
That's right, paramysium. Okay, and remember this is a fascicle, and inside the fascicle you would have the individual muscle fiber, right? Muscle cell. So that's a muscle cell. That's another muscle cell. And each of the muscle cell is surrounded by the endomysium, okay, which I don't think is shown here. It's just telling you this is a muscle fiber. And when you take a look at the individual muscle fiber, right? All these red rings, they are actually the T tubules, okay, which would then go into each of these myofibrils, right? That's what number 5 is, myofibrils. And myofibrils are made up of repeating units of sarcomere, right? So that's a sarcomere, that's another sarcomere. And wrapping around the sarcomere is number 6. What's number 6? What's number 6?
Sarcoplasmic
Reticulum.
That's right, the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which contains calcium, right? Okay, the calcium that's gonna be very important for muscle contraction. Okay, number 7, I think, is just a mitochondria that supplies the ATP. Okay, and if we take a look at what is making up the myofibril, then we have 2 kind of fibers. We have the thick one here, represented by orange, and then the red one is the thin one. So that's the actin, thin filament, and then we have the myosin, which is the one that's going to be grabbing onto the actin. You see, the myosin actually have all these heads, the purple heads. The purple head's going to grab on the actin. It's going to pull. It's going to shorten the sarcomere, which ultimately shortens the myofibril, which then shorten the muscle fiber, shorten the fascicle, and then shorten the entire muscle. Okay? That's as clear as I can be. I cannot explain more. I think most of you understand, right? I mean, sure, it takes some time to memorize it, but hopefully you understand the organization. Okay? Anything you want to clarify with me? Okay, of course, there is a coloring sheet that you can do as well in the study guide, right? You can color it on your own. You can fill this in. No point for me to fill it in now because we just talked about it. It's probably still fresh in your head, right? But when you go study, when you go try to internalize this yourself, fill it in, and I will post the answer for you to compare it to. Okay. Alrighty. Let's go back to our PowerPoint slides. We're almost there. We are going like way faster than I anticipated. So more of the same thing, right? Just professional drawing, pulling things out one at a time, and eventually we get to the sarcomere. Okay, you can read this on your own. It tells you what it is surrounded by and what does it contain. So you can use this slide as a reference to help complete this table. I basically copy the images over, okay, and then you can just, fill it in yourself. Okay, so this is the muscle fiber, the actual muscle cell. And you can see the myofibril that I was talking about, right? Each of them is bundled with a sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, you have some mitochondria here. And the T tubules, the yellow ones that I was drawing, they actually, if you follow them, right, it has been cut away here, but if you go all the way, follow them, it eventually leads to an opening that exists on the surface of the cell, right? Okay, we're going to talk about the importance of that opening later on. Okay, I'm just going to tell you the answer. A fascicle is covered by, okay, hopefully your choice would be the paramecium. And what does a fascicle contain? Fascicle contains muscle fibers, muscle cell. So the myofibrils, which are the stuff that you find inside the muscle cell, inside the muscle fiber, okay, is very, very thin, about 1 micrometer in diameter. And it's composed of numerous repeating sarcomeres that are joined end to end, right? So I already told you the sarcomere is going to contain 2 types of protein filaments here. We have the thick filament, which is the myosin. That's the one that has the heads. The heads will grab onto the thin filament, which is made up of actin, tropomyosin, and troponin. These 2 are new. Okay, I didn't tell you about them earlier, but they are there. Okay, and I'll explain what their functions are shortly. Okay. So let me try to explain this here. I don't have notes on it, so I'm just gonna explain it, and you write down the stuff. Okay. Here we can see that the red is represented by the actin. Okay, you learned actin from last semester. Remember, that's part of the cytoskeleton, right? So there's the actin, and the actins has binding sites on them for the myosin. Okay, those binding sites are shown here in black circles. And those are the binding sites for the myosin. Okay, when you expose the binding site, the myosin head will grab onto that and pull on it. But normally they are covered up. Okay, so myosin binding sites are covered up when your muscle is not contracting. Okay, we don't contract all the muscle at all the time. Right? If you're just sitting here for now, like you're not moving your legs, right, too much, and so you don't need to contract those muscles. So on those muscles, the myosin binding sites would be covered up. So the protein that covers up the myosin binding sites are the tropomyosin. Tropomyosin. Okay, so this long strand of green proteins. They're not actually green, but like it's green in the diagram, right? Okay, so the purpose of the tropomyosin is to cover myosin binding site when you are not contracting the muscle. The position of the tropomyosin is controlled by the troponin. Okay, so troponin controls the position of tropomyosin. Okay, do you cover the binding site or do you expose the binding site? The troponin will basically roll the tropomyosin one way or the other to either cover them up or expose them. Okay, so in the absence of calcium, the troponin will position the tropomyosin such that it covers up the binding site. So this is no calcium, no contraction. Okay. When there is calcium, and I'll tell you where the calcium comes from later, when calcium is available, the calcium binds to the troponin, which then rolls away the tropomyosin, and then you expose the myosin binding site. Okay. Once you expose the myosin binding site, then the myosin, this is the myosin, will grab onto it. Okay, you don't have to know the details of how it happens, but basically it goes like this: the myosin head grabs onto the actin on the binding site, it pulls, okay, and then ATP causes it to let go and reposition, and then grab and pull, and then grab and pull. It keeps on doing this. Okay, keeps on doing this, so it allows the muscle to shorten. Okay, the key thing is you need to expose the binding site before it can grab onto it. Now here's another thing. Once the myosin grabs onto it and pull, ATP must come to allow the detach. Right? Once it detaches, it cocks back into the original position, grabs the next side, and then pull. And then ATP comes, detach, reposition, grab, pull. Detach, let go, reposition, grabs, pull. The ATP is important for the detachment. Right? You might have heard of rigor mortis, okay? The stiffening of muscle when a person dies. Right? So when the person dies, they no longer make ATP. So without the ATP, the myosin grabs onto the muscle, but it's not going to be able to let go because ATP is not coming for the detachment, right? Okay, so the muscle stiffens up. Right? Rigor mortis. So that's the sliding filament theory. Right? If you understand what I said, then you should be okay. I don't think there's a lot of question on this. Maybe one or two. Any questions before we move on? All right. Sorry, I'm just gonna run to bathroom quickly. I will be right back. Sorry about that. 1 minute. Now, I don't know if you guys use that video resources that I post on online. You know, if you go to like study resources, there are a bunch of videos that I collect over the internet, right? That relates to each of the topics that we learn. So there is a video that shows how this works in an animation. It's a little bit old, right? It's not you know, too fancy looking, but it gets the point across, right? So check that out if you want to have a visual representation of this. Okay, so this is, we're not going to go through all the details with the A band and the I band and so on and so forth. The key thing to remember from this slide, the key thing to know from this slide is that we have the thick filaments, which are the myosin, that's the blue stuff, okay, the myosin right here. And then we have the actin. Okay, and of course, the actin is covered with the tropomyosin. And then there's the troponin that controls the position of the tropomyosin, right? Yeah. But once you expose the binding site, then the myosin, the head, which is shown by these little spikes here, they will grab onto the actin and then pull. Okay, let go and grab on and pull and grab on and pull and keep on doing this. And that's how you can see every time it pulls, the Z line, which is the ends of the sarcomere, is going to get closer to each other, closer to each other, closer to each other. Now, these little green things here, which we will not learn, but they are like little springs. Okay, so every time the actin, every time the myosin grabs and pull, and when they let go, then the sarcomere will slowly go back to normal length. That's why it's a continuous action. That's why the myosin, as long as the calcium is available, they will grab and pull and let go, and then they have to keep on pulling, okay? Because the sarcomere gets shortened, but as soon as the myosin let go, they start to lengthen again. So they have to grab, right? And then lengthens again, and it has to keep on grabbing to maintain that contraction. Okay, so like if you're carrying something heavy, like a grocery bag or, you know, whatever you're carrying, like a suitcase or something, the muscle has to continuously contract to maintain the tension, right? So that you can exert force to hold that thing up, okay? And that whole process is essentially the myosin keeps on grabbing, keeps on pulling on the actin, and that requires the calcium. Now you are probably wondering, where does the calcium come from? Okay, so muscle contraction note. We're not gonna write the notes, okay? It's basically what I told you. You know, we don't have to physically write it out. But let's take a look at here with this diagram. Okay, so we have the spinal cord, section of the spinal cord, and we have the motor neuron, right? Okay, so if it's a skeletal muscle that we're trying to move, then it has to come from the primary motor cortex, right? So the primary motor cortex initiates a signal. That signal travels down the spinal cord, right, in the descending track, of course. And when it gets to the appropriate part of the body, it will exit through the motor neuron. Right? The signal goes out at the front, of course. You remember that. So let's say you want to move the hand, right? Then this would be a thoracic nerve, okay, one of those that comes out from the thoracic section. And then that motor nerve is going to go and connect to a bunch of muscle fibers. Okay, these are individual muscle cells. Okay, so the motor neuron actually like spread out towards the axon terminal. It spreads out into multiple connections that would connect to a bunch of muscle fibers. So it's not like one motor neuron to one muscle fiber. We won't have enough neuronal connection to do that. Okay. Now remember that weird picture that I show you about like how your brain perceives your body as, you know, with the really big lower lips and the hands are really big. Remember the picture, right? So for the hands, where we need to have very fine control, very high dexterity, you would have more individualized motor neuron for the muscle fibers. Okay, so the ratio between the motor neurons and the muscle fibers are lower. Okay, you might have one motor neuron going to, I'm making this up, like 10, 20 muscle fibers, as opposed to for like your thigh muscle, where is just explosive type of contraction, right? That you need when you're running, for example, right? Or if you're walking even, right? That requires more force and less fine control. So in those areas, the ratio between the motor neurons and the muscle fibers is going to be much lower, right? You might have one motor neuron that controls like 100 or 200 muscle fibers in the thigh as opposed to in your hands. Do you understand? Okay. So for fine control motion, for muscles that requires very delicate movement, like the hand, the muscle, right? You have low ratio between motor neurons and the muscle fibers. Okay. They require a lot of attention. Okay. But then when it comes to muscle that are for like explosive type of motion, okay, posture muscle, that kind of stuff, then you have a higher ratio, right? One motor neuron can control a bunch of muscle fibers instead of individual ones. All right. So what's going on at the connection? We call that a neuromuscular junction. Okay. Previously, we already learned about like synaptic connection between a neuron and a neuron, right? But now this is a neuromuscular junction, a connection between a muscle and a neuron. And it's pretty much same thing, okay? I don't have a picture here, but at the end, you would have the axon terminal, okay? And then you would have some vesicles, and then that's going to be the muscle fiber right here, muscle fiber. Okay, and then you're gonna have like a T tubules here. T stands for transverse, by the way, a T tubules that will lead down, right, to your sarcoplasmic reticulum. So when the action potential comes, it will cause the release of neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters that we use for communication is acetylcholine, ACH for short. So the acetylcholine will then cause channels to open and a signal to pass down the T tubules. Okay, so signal is gonna get all the way into the cell. Okay, and the signal will cause the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release the calcium. Okay, so once again, signal starts at the primary motor cortex, goes down the spinal cord, exits whichever section. If you want to move your leg, then it comes out the lumbar section, right? The signal. If you want to move your hand, then it comes out in the thoracic section. And then the motor neuron spreads out to connect to all these muscle fibers, and then the whole group of them is going to contract. But that requires the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, ACH, to create a signal that spreads down the T tubule, which then causes the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release the calcium. What does the calcium do? The calcium is going to bind to the troponin, and the troponin will roll away the tropomyosin, which was covering the myosin binding site. Once the myosin binding sites are exposed, the myosin will grab onto it and it will pull, and then it will shorten the sarcomere. And that's ultimately how you create the contraction. Any question? Okay, great. So some diseases before we finish up the lesson. We have the motor neuron disorders such as polio. Okay, polio infects and kills motor neuron, the virus, it does. And that could result in paralysis. And death is possible because if the motor neurons that controls your breathing muscle is damaged, then the person cannot breathe, right? And that could result in death. Polios mainly affect children under the age of 5. 1 in 200 infections leads to irreversible paralysis, but fortunately there is a polio vaccine that exists. Okay, and the Bill Gates, you guys know Bill Gates, right? He has a foundation, with his ex-wife now, the Gates and Melinda Foundation. They are funding for the eradication of polio, and it's very close to eradicating polios. But with the pushback of anti-vaxxers, and there are some places that are really hard to deliver the vaccine to because of a lack of infrastructures in these developing places. It's close to eradicating polio, but not quite there yet. Okay? But there is a way to stop it, right? The vaccine is exceedingly effective in preventing polios. Here's another one, the ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Okay, you guys might have heard of Stephen Hawking. He had ALS, and when he was in his early 20s, the doctor said you will be dead in a couple of years. But of course, he lived a relatively long, quite a long actually, and productive life. With the condition. In ALS, the motor neurons are completely destroyed by your own immune system. Okay, so they slowly kill the motor neurons because they recognize it as foreign. And once you lose the motor neuron, you lose control of a certain part of the body. It's a progressive disease, right? That gets worse and worse and worse. And when finally, again, if the respiratory muscles are no longer functioning, right, then that could lead to respiratory failure and ultimately death. The ALS raised a lot of awareness in 2014. I don't know, like this was like 9 years ago, so some of you might still be quite young. But if you're old enough, you might remember there was an ice bucket challenge. It was very widespread on social media. People basically dump buckets of ice onto them themselves, and then they would challenge 3 other people to do the same. And if they don't do it, they would donate money to the research of ALS, or they could do it and then they also donate money. So celebrities did it. Lots of U.S. presidents did it. Centennial was part of this ice bucket challenge at the time as well, with the president back then. Anyway, so that raised over $220 million for research in ALS. Okay, just a couple more diseases. The botulism. Botulism, you probably have heard of Botox, right? Okay, so Botox is basically injecting a toxin that's produced by the bacteria Clostridium botulinum. Okay, so that's the same bacteria that causes botulism, which is a type of food poisoning. And this toxin basically disrupts communication between the nerve and the muscle. Okay? It blocks the motor neuron from releasing the acetylcholine. Without the acetylcholine, you won't be able to trigger a signal down the T-tubules, and there will be no muscle contraction. So that basically causes a paralysis. Okay, of course it could be deadly if you have high doses of this toxin in your body, and it's not something you can just cook it and make it go away. It's not the bacteria that's causing the problem. It's the toxin that they produce, right? And even with heat, you can't really break down some of these toxins. And so in Botox, which is, for those of you who don't know, like injections that people can make to make the wrinkles go away as you age. And the way it kind of works is it causes muscle paralysis, right? So when you inject it at very, very low dose, it causes some of the muscles in the face to relax, right? To not be able to contract. And that causes the wrinkles to not show up. I mean, like you know, you don't see my wrinkle right now, but then if I, you know, do this to my forehead, then you see the wrinkles, right? So if you paralyze those muscles, then I cannot move my forehead, and then bye-bye wrinkles, right? That's basically the idea. All right. It's kind of funny because I always drive by this place near my house, and it's this plaza in the corner, and they always have this sign that says, you know, $10 Botox, right? Come in now and get your shots. And I always laugh when I see that sign. I was like, you know, if you're gonna be injecting like toxins into your face, maybe $10 a shot is not the best option. You know, I don't know. I don't know how much it regularly is, but $10 sounds ridiculously low, and I don't know if the toxin is diluted enough. Right? If it's too concentrated, then that could have disastrous outcome, as you can imagine. Anyway, another one is called tetanus, which you probably might have heard of. Right? Tetanus is caused by a bacteria that's related to botulism. Right? They both start with the name. They both belong to the genus Clostridium. Okay, so this is Clostridium tetani, and it prevents a toxin that prevents the spinal cord from releasing inhibitory neurotransmitter. So what does it mean? In addition to acetylcholine, which causes contraction, there are neurotransmitters that we didn't talk about that would inhibit neurotransmitters, and you would need that to relax your muscle. Okay, and also, you know, if you want to contract your biceps, you need to relax the tricep, right? If both of them contracts, then you lock your hand in place, you know, because they're pulling together. It's like a tug of war. It doesn't go one way or the other. You are stuck, right? So the toxin produced by this bacteria that causes tetanus prevents your muscle from relaxing. So it contracts, it stiffens, and then you're stuck. Okay, so this is the bacteria. It looks like a sour key, and you don't want to get that. So in during the World War I, where there was a lot of trench warfare, soldiers get infections from staying in the trenches for too long. And, they have cuts in their legs, and the bacteria they can get into their wounds and cause them to basically, you know, be stiffen up, right? And then the artists depict what the patient looks like, right? You can see all the muscles. It's all stiffened up, it's all contracted because the inhibitory neurotransmitter is blocked by the toxin. You cannot relax, right? What's another name for tetanus? Does anybody know? Like the common name for it? Something to do with the jaw? Somebody heard of it?
Lockjaw.
Yeah, exactly. It's called locked jaw because you can see in this picture, right? The jaw is locked in place, can't relax. Okay. So where do you catch it? I mean, you know, for botulism, you eat contaminated food, but for tetanus, people say, you know, if you get cut by rusted nails, right, you should go get your tetanus shot. Although it doesn't have to be rusted nail, okay? If you get cut by random stuff in the soil, you should talk to your doctor to see if you need a tetanus shot, okay? Because a lot of these bacteria, they are anaerobics. They can live in environment that doesn't have a lot of that doesn't have oxygen at all. They could survive there. So anytime you get cut, you know, by something outside, you know, consult your doctor. I told you I get bit by a dog, right? When I was running outside, I also needed a tetanus shot because apparently their saliva contains bacteria that could cause tetanus. Although I never really fully understand that. Like, you know, what if a dog legs you, right? Like, is that the same thing, or like it only happens when they bit you? Like, I don't know. I gotta look that up. It's kind of like a zombie thing, right? Like it only matters if they bite you. Like if they touch you, you're gonna be okay. I don't know. Something that keeps me up at night. Okay, we are almost there. Just a couple last slide, and these are interesting things to think about. There are two types of muscle fibers that exist in your body. Muscle fibers are muscle cells, right? You have some slow twitch fiber, and then you have fast twitch fibers. Okay, they are specialized in doing different things. Now, I don't want you to think that a muscle is either one or the other. It's usually a combination of fast and slow twitch fibers, but more of one over the other if the muscle is designated for a particular task. Okay, so slow twitch fibers, they contract slowly. Okay, they are not very good at producing, bursts of energy. Okay, they don't create a lot of forces. Okay, but they have endurance. They are good for contracting for a long time, and you're not going to get tired from it. Okay, and the reason they don't get tired, part of the reasons, is because they have what's called myoglobin, which is better than hemoglobin in terms of delivering oxygen. Okay, so this myoglobin usually gives the muscle a darker color. Okay, so the darker color is what makes up the so-called dark meat. Okay, so these are again good for endurance. So like your posture muscle, you can literally sit here for 3 hours listening to your prof, right? Talking about lecture, and I mean you might mentally feel tired, but like your body is not going to be tired, not in the same sense that you run for 3 hours, right? Okay, so those are the slow twitch fibers that are maintaining the posture for you. Okay, and so you would have slow twitch in like your back muscle, your neck muscle, right, and all these areas. So when you eat dark meat, yeah, the dark meats are usually from parts of an animal where the muscle is not used for bursts of energy. Okay, so like what is this? This is beef. So cows, they don't really. Sure, they can run if they want to, but usually they just stand there and graze all day, right? Okay, so that's not gonna require bursts of energy. So that's why it's like red meat. This is duck breast. Okay, so what is chicken breast? Can anybody know if chicken breast is white meat or dark meat?
White meat.
That's right. So white meat is fast twitch fibers. They are not good for endurance. Okay, they are good for like bursts of energy, like rapid movement, like getting out of the way when a predator is coming towards you. Okay, jumping up to catch a ball, right? Doing a sprint, right? So I don't know if you know, but chickens cannot fly. Okay, but I mean, they could jump up and then flap their wings a little bit, and then they would land. Okay, and the reason chickens cannot fly, whereas ducks can fly, is because of the kind of muscle that's in their breast. Okay, so duck breast is dark meat. Okay, they are good for slow. They have high ratio of slow twitch fibers, so they can flap their wings for a long time and not get tired. You don't want to be flapping your wings and flying and you're like, oh, I'm too tired. You're gonna fall and crash, right? That's not a good thing if you're a duck. Okay, so you need those dark meat in the breast to sustain the flapping motion. Chickens, on the other hand, has white meat, and so they oops. And so they flap their wings, and then they don't get tired. They get tired really quickly, and then they would just land back. All right. Salmon is red meat, okay? Because salmon, again, I don't know if you know, but salmon always swim against the current, right? Especially during mating seasons, and that requires muscle that is able to sustain endurance, right? Not going to get tired easily. Whereas if you think about fish like tilapia, right? Halibut, that kind of stuff, right? They just have to kind of dash out of the way when something tries to eat them, right? So burst of energy, fast twitch. Okay. You can change though. Okay, you can train your muscle. So if you train for a marathon, right, then the amount of then the percentage of slow twitch fiber is going to increase, right? Whereas you're training for sprinting, right, 100-meter sprint or something, then it's going to change into more fast twitch fibers, right? It's not a fixed thing; it's a ratio. Someone said, would hummingbirds have slow or fast twitch fiber? That is a funny question. Yeah, I would guess it's gonna be the slow twitch, right? Because they flap the wings like what is it, like a couple hundred times per second, right? So I guess it's really, really fast, right? But I mean, I don't know. Like, no one eats like hummingbird breast, right? So like, it's just a theoretical thing. Someone also said, I had a coworker that stabbed herself under the thumbnail and almost lost her thumb because she didn't take it seriously. Yeah, lots of stories like this. I've read about people sharpening their skates and getting a cut, and then end up having to lose a finger because of not just tetanus. There are other things to worry about. Flesh-eating diseases, right? That's another one. Is called S. pyogeny. That's the bacteria, right? So lots of things can go into your thumb, under like when you have a cut, right? And so never take these things lightly. Okay. All right. That's it. Okay, I'm just gonna take up the last few questions here, and then I'll send you on your way. Which protein covers the binding site of actin? Which one is it? If you're thinking tropomyosin, you would be correct. That's the green strand I was telling you, right? The troponin controls the position of the tropomyosin. Which neurotransmitter is needed for muscle contraction? If you have been listening, then you know it's going to be the acetylcholine. The choline esterase is the one that that's being blocked in the tetanus. We just didn't say the name, but that's okay. You don't have to know. That's all. That's all. All right. Next class, which is Wednesday, we're going to be doing the reproductive system. That one is super short. We will definitely get it done within one class. And then that's just one lesson left afterwards. Okay. We're very, very close to the end. There was a question about, okay, yeah. Which question? Someone is messaging me. What question about RAS? When is it produced? Okay, so okay. Wait, is this a quiz question or is this like a practice quiz question? Oh, from your notes. Okay, let me see. Give me a second here. This is lecture 9, right? Oh, by the way, someone emailed me about one of the questions in the practice quiz, that there was a mistake. The question goes something like this. I don't have the exact question here, but if you did the practice quiz, there was a question that says, if the hypothalamus releases ADH, what's going to happen to water absorption? Okay, the correct answer is it will increase water absorption. Okay, so the answer key was wrong. It says it will reduce water absorption. That's not correct. I fixed it already. Okay, so you should be okay. Okay, so here's the question that people is asking. Which of the following activities would trigger the RAS, right? So the purpose of RAS is to bring your blood pressure up, and it could be triggered when you are dehydrated, when you're losing blood pressure, right? And so which of these activity cause you to, be more dehydrated? So not the first one. Okay, shoveling driveway for a couple hours, sure, you might sweat a little bit, okay, but you're not going to sweat as much as mowing the lawn for an hour on a hot summer day, right? Okay, so if I have to choose one, the answer would be C. Does it make sense? Okay, that's it. So yeah, go ahead, Shirley.
I'm still confused at this question. I don't know why.
Okay, so remember in the notes I said RAS is triggered by by low blood pressure, yes? And I said examples that would cause low blood pressure would be dehydration and blood loss, right? Excessive blood loss. Okay, so these examples here, A, B, C, D, E, basically are different scenarios that might or might not cause dehydration. Okay, so which one caused you to dehydrate more? What activity caused you to sweat more, basically, right? Yeah.
I see, yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else before we say goodbye? All right, remember you have two attempts for the quiz, okay? Make sure you take advantage of that, and I wish all of you get A+. And I will see you all on Wednesday. Okay, bye for now.